Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cocktails and Rocktails with me, your most notorious groupie, Allison Rouse, author of We've Got Tonight, this little book right here, these other little books, where you can get that my funny as hell merchandise down in that description. So go down, check it out, fiddle about. You won't get a tap, tap, tap from me. And you can see today's another blackout episode, but there's a reason for that. But let's start out, as always, being so thankful for just all the amazing opportunities that the family here has given me, all the amazing people that are here that are having conversations or just hanging out and enjoying it, and really growing the channel and making this a very awesome place to be. So thank you guys so much for finding me interesting, for just being here, for growing the channel, for being an amazing family. You guys are absolutely amazing, and I just really will never ever be able to tell you how thankful I am. There's just no words. So thank you, family. You guys are awesome. You're badass. I love you so much. And today, as always, we are going to, like I said, have a blackout episode. I'm kind of doing this one on the fly because I didn't like what I had for today's episode. But I've kind of been wanting to read through a couple things. I like to go through other rock and roll books, other rock chick books, anything that had to do with music. I absolutely love it. And there's one book that I have done a review on before here, but I've not read any of it. So today we are going to read from the book The Ox by that fucking dick, Paul Reese. I say that fucking dick because Paul Reese never bothered to once reach out to me to ask me about John, how we met, what happened that last night, this and that. So I wanted to read the last couple chapters of this book to kind of see what was going on in his life, in John's life, and kind of see, because he does talk to like Bill Kerbishley. I wanted to see their perspective, how they explain the night to him. Because remember, in my book, I was around Bill Kerbishley that day. So that's what we're doing today, you guys. And today we are going to have our locals, my favorite, Shades, our peach cobbler sour, you guys. This is one of my favorites. It is absolutely delicious. And I believe they are getting ready to go national. So be checking out for them on your shelves, you guys. If you see Shades, you like a different flavor, go grab them up. They're awesome. They're rock. Marcio is one of the best brewmasters I know. Absolutely amazing. Like I said, he was a biochemist from Brazil and decided to become a brewmaster. And the way he does his flavors, like this peach cobbler, you can totally taste like the graham cracker crust, everything, everything. It's just the slight touch of cinnamon. It's amazing. But okay, so everybody, grab your cobblers, get your peaches, and let's have a little cocktails and rocktails to see how true they are. All right, buddy. Cheers, big ears. Okay, so we're going to be reading chapter 22 and 23 of The Ox. And let me read this last chapter because, a lot of people give me shit. Well, don't you care? Like, one girl was like, didn't you care about what his girlfriend Lisa said at home? They were broken up. John had just broken up with her a couple months before, according to him and Cy. And she was not exactly the shiny, happy little person for his life. All right, so the last episode, or the last couple paragraphs of chapter 21 is where we're going to kind of start. There were other times when John got to be very morose about things, and especially about Lisa. They argued all the time. But you couldn't say anything against her to him. You weren't allowed to. To a great extent, that ended up bringing about the end of my own marriage. Leah just didn't understand why I couldn't and wouldn't say certain things to my dad. And this is Christopher, his son, speaking. If I did say a bad word about Lisa when she was back in his good books, he wouldn't forget that. I had to shut my mouth. Lisa had him in a very dark place in his head. She would be all sweetness and light to my face, but I was aware of the fact that she was backstabbing me to my dad. She was desperate to get me out of the picture because I knew the extent of what was going on. even though I could do nothing about it. Those latter years were the most horrible of my life. It's sad, but that whole time, I can't think of very many high points. I got to be with my dad at least. When he got up, I would go over and sit with him in the kitchen and we'd chat. He would have his cup of tea and chocolate biscuits and be doing his crossword. Otherwise, life around Corwood was not fun. It was Lisa that truly fucked him up, and I hate her for what she did to him. And I always talk about this, that just because they're the woman at home doesn't make her the saint. I mean, Lisa was previously with Joe Walsh for years, and Joe Walsh was notoriously heavy partier, but he couldn't even keep up with Lisa, and he had enough of it. She cheated with John. John cheated with her on Maxine, actually, because when I met John, him and Lisa were just starting to, I believe, kind of start sneaking around. Him and Maxine had just got married. I know they got married in '89, and that's when I very first met John. But what people don't realize, that I've said it in my podcast when I talk about it, took John 2 years to get me into bed. It wasn't until Maxine went to rehab, and there's a whole other story that went on there that ended their marriage. So, she had a lovely son, and I'm not condemning her for cheating on John by any means, because she had to deal with a lot. I mean, yeah, that's John's love life was fucking twisted, and Lisa screwed his whole life up, and she was actually 100% trying to cut anybody out of John's life that didn't serve her purpose. She was a drug addict, a severe cocaine head. She died just about 2.5 years after John did of a cocaine overdose. She actually tried to call me from Florida when she was there. And when I would pick up the phone, she wouldn't answer. She would just hang up. And I figured out it was her because of the number in Florida and so on and so on. But anyway, and that's where John was in his head. And the night John passed away, I don't talk about our conversations. We were talking about it. He said, we are broken up. He's like, I'm done. He's like, I can't be this person anymore. I can't have this in my life. Everything's, even my mother, his own mother, she was causing issues with Queenie. Um, and he said, don't answer the phone, because if you answer it, she'll fucking freak out. Yeah, Lisa was a basket case. All right. So this is the beginning of chapter 22, Last Orders. In the spring of 1999, the John Entwistle Band went back out on the road, beginning at the Marriott Hotel Complex in Atlanta, Georgia on May 22nd. They toured until the third week of August, trawling up and down the east coast of the U.S. for the greater part. These were club shows, inglorious and financially unrewarding. One date on their itinerary, though stood out. On July 10th, Entwistle was invited to appear at the Woodstock '99 festival. Staged over 3 days and disused, staged over 3 days on a disused airbase in upstate New York to mark the 30th anniversary of the original. Since the bill was largely comprised of contemporary alternative rock acts such as Red Hot Chili Peppers, Rage Against the Machine, and Limp Bizkit, Entwistle's presence allowed the organizers to claim a direct link between their show and the fabled one of 1969. That was a last moment thing, says Gordon Cotton. When we pulled up to the site, all that John said was, "What the fuck am I doing here?" I could hear him saying that too. Three, money. 3 decades and a battery of corporate sponsors separated Woodstock from '99 from its parent. Yet, as an event, the modern irritation proved to be every bit as grueling and ill-equipped. That weekend in New York was a boiling one. The daytime temperatures were rising to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The site had been cleared of trees so that there was no shade to be found anywhere. Why'd they cut down all the fucking trees? Drink and food prices at the concession stands were exorbitant. A mood of frustration and anger soon prevailed among the 400,000 strong festival audience. This began to bubble up during Limp Bizkit's Saturday night set. There were skirmishes in the crowd, and sections of the plywood perimeter fencing were also ripped down. On Sunday afternoon, Entwistle and his band were the second act on the site's third stage. Under a blazing sun, they appreciative but distracted audience played to an appreciative but a distracted audience numbering a few thousand. Later that same night, Entwistle had also been asked to make a guest appearance with headlining Red Hot Chili Peppers. However, by then, Woodstock 99 had slipped out from everyone's control. As the Peppers played, fans tore down more tracks of fencing and also vendor stands, using them as kindling to start huge bonfires. With the sight aflame, 4 sexual assaults were reported. A force of New York State troopers eventually arrived to quell the carnage. Steve Luongo remembers, "When I got home and turned on MTV, I was expecting to see Entwistle's triumphant return, and all I saw instead were fires and mayhem." The whole tour also did nothing to alleviate Entwistle's cash flow issues, which were once again becoming serious. The situation got to be so precarious that Bobby Pridden put in a call to Daltrey, alerting him to the fact that Entwistle would need to be bailed out. Daltrey in turn went to see Townsend and to float the idea of doing a Who tour to assist Entwistle. Townsend prevaricated at first, but was persuaded to go out again the next summer when they would do a 38 dates around the US and UK. On the matter of Townsend's initial resistance, Daltrey later wrote, "Pete was an addict himself. He knew the risks. He knew that if we helped out John, we risked becoming his enablers. John was an alcoholic, and he had a good nose for hoovering up whatever was left at the party. It had all caught up with him." And now keep in mind that John, I know, didn't drink that much, but it doesn't mean he wasn't an alcoholic. He, like that night, he had no alcohol in his system that night. I thought he was having coffee and brandies because he was definitely having coffee. Um, and he sometimes had, brandy in his coffees. And when the coroner's report came back, there was no alcohol in John's system from that night, which, like I said, shocked the hell out of me. I know we didn't have any when we went back up to the room, but yeah, so was he an alcoholic? He did depend on alcohol a lot. Was he addicted to the cocaine and being dragged down a black hole with Lisa into the point where Lisa was, which Lisa was many, many phases ahead of him as far as being an addict and how it affected her life and John's life in a domino effect. Um, John was not quite there yet, but you could tell he was wanting to get the fuck away from it. And according to Lori Luongo, now Luongo this is Steve's, he is John's solo band's drummer's wife. This is who we're talking about. According to Lori Luongo, Entwistle by now had reservations of his own about touring with The Who. "I started to notice that John would be very different around The Who," she says. "He got to feel uncomfortable about being with them, I think. They would have their own dressing rooms," which was at this point in the 2000s was absolutely normal for any band. I mean, maybe with the John Entwistle band, they shared the dressing room because it was smaller clubs. It wasn't the same finances, stuff like that. But with larger acts, the Rolling Stones, Metallica, The Who, U2, everybody, even the Backstreet Boys, they all have different dressing rooms. I understand what the connotation she means, though, but The Who by this point had been in different dressing rooms since I knew him in 1989. So it wasn't like this was something that happened overnight. This was around 2002. So 11 years this was still going on. But she's saying this because this is how bands are off stage. And this demonstrates the distance that you guys don't see if you're just watching the show from the front of the stage. Okay. Da, 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 da. They would all have their own dressing rooms. They all flew separately. He was very uptight around them. He likened it to being in jail. He would say to us, "I have to go back to Who jail." But at the same time, John loved being in The Who. As much as he wanted to break free of the definition of The Who as a musician and financially, he loved The Who because it gave him that rock star legendary status. It's what he built his solo band off of it. Yes, it was exhausting, it was tiring because you deal with Roger and Pete. John was just the one that was off on his own thing. Roger and Pete were the two divas of the tour always. So I do not blame him there. All right. 10 days prior to setting off with The Who, Entwistle ended up doing a very different kind of show. Going through the Corwood mail one morning that May, Christopher had happened across a letter from John DeCanny, who drummed with the local cover band, The Stowaways. Tongue firmly in cheek, DeCanny conveyed that his band had a charity gig coming up at the British Legion Club in Stowe, but were without a bass player, and would Entwistle be interested in filling in? I mean, this guy sends this as a joke, and what happens? Huh. Christopher dutifully read the letter out to his father. He went "Ugh" to begin with, recalls Christopher, but I managed to convince him that it would be a fun thing to do, so he had me call up this guy and invite him round to the house. Naturally, John DeCanny was flabbergasted. In fact, he thought I was one of his mates taking a piss. He didn't believe it until the moment that he drove up to the house and Dad went out to welcome him. And this is, yeah, Christopher talking, because Christopher, one of the reasons this book it just kind of infuriates me is John's first Allison, his first wife. I'm the last Allison. She kind of did have a lot of control over certain things that weren't so favorable in other people. So, but Christopher is very candid, very much forward, and I appreciate that about him. So the show went ahead on the evening of Saturday, May 27th, 2000, in front of a couple hundred locals and a crew from a regional television news show, Central News. Armed with his trusty alembic, I don't know how to say it, alembic bass, and sporting a pair of blue suede shoes, I loved those shoes, Entwistle took up his customary spot stage right from where he was the center of all attention. He was up there pissing about and showing off, which he loved to do, says Christopher. Yes, he did. John was a bit of a peacock. And let's face it, we knew he was larger than life. When he stood on that stage, as Pete and Roger had to do all the antics of smashing guitars, jumping up and down, windmills, throwing this mic around, stuff like that, cartwheels, all that. John just stood there and he still owned that stage. All right. That night, he had also had everyone tell him what a wonderful person he was, and he always loved to hear that too. Okay, on June 6th, The Who kicked off their U.S. tour at a New York City arena, the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center, located on the Manhattan bank of the Hudson River. 2 months later, they had crossed over to the West Coast, and on August 14th, played the Hollywood Bowl. Now, this is 2000. This is not 2002. At Entwistle's invitation, Maxine went along to the LA show. He always invited her out to the LA shows or wherever she was nearby. I was devastated at how old, haggard, and unhealthy he looked. Says Maxine. John always was like one of those lost boys in Peter Pan. He never wanted to grow up. But it's one thing to be young at heart and quite another to carry on living as if you're still 19 when you're in your mid-50s. It just doesn't work. At one point during the show, Roger handed the mic over to John and he announced, I want to dedicate this next song to my second wife, who's out there in the audience. John had the most wonderful deep voice. I could never emulate it. The song was My Wife, and I all but fell out of my seat. After the show, I went over and gave John a hug. I whispered in his ear, You never, ever honored me like that in all of our 14 years together. Well, John squeezed me tight, and that took my breath away, and he told me, I'm so proud of you. I wish I could do what you've done, which means get sober. Right then, I knew that his days were numbered. There was a decline in John, and you can't beat around the bush about that, says Bill Kerbishley, the band's manager. He drank vast amounts, plus he was doing cocaine and whatever else. He was all up. He had started to on a bit of weight, too. Everything combined to exasperate the problem that he had with his heart. So everything combined exasperated the problem. But he had always told us he wait, but which he had always told us was quite trivial. So even then, I didn't have any fear for him. Um, that October, the Who returned to New York to do a 4-night engagement in Madison Square Garden. Entwistle flew Lisa out to join him for the shows. Under any circumstances, New York's nighttime temptations, together with Lisa, would have been a potent cocktail for him to take. By this stage in their relationship, it became a shove into a new and hellish frontier. And I saw it on him, like who he was from the day she moved in to the man that I met in 1989 to the man that was with me that night when he died in 2002. We're two very, very different men. And Lisa was just that toxic. And she was years and years of toxicness, of toxic and drugs and addiction and anger and bipolar and abuse heaved onto John. Because John was an abused man by her. So after the first night's show, the two of them made off to the China Club. Lisa barreled around the place looking to score drugs. At a certain point, a stranger invited her along to another club where she was told she would be able to pick up cocaine of a premium quality. And Lisa was like that. She was like a bull in a fucking china shop that way. And she was loud and obnoxious and she was so fake. Like so fake. She's such a bitch. Without saying a word to Entwistle, Lisa hightailed it from the China Club and was gone for the next 2 days. At their Manhattan hotel, Entwistle was left to stew and grew increasingly frantic. Because like I said, this is the addictive behavior that was happening. She would bring home people from the local pub or from different pubs around Stowe and just fucking line out coke and give him money to go get more coke, and they would steal from John, even stealing his bank card and stealing $25,000, which they gave back. But this is who Lisa was. When Lisa did pitch back up, she was in a wretched state, which only intensified Entwistle's fury. The final night of their stay, he invited the Luongos up to the hotel suite after the garden show, which when you're doing that much cocaine, and she probably cheated on him, and she was probably coked to the gills, and she was probably going through withdrawals, and she was probably going through, who knows what else. So she was in a completely, I remember John telling me about this. Oh, she was in a completely twisted state by this point. They arrived in the suite to find the Luongos um got to the suite and they arrived to find a dreadful scene unfolding. Lisa was holed up in the bedroom, weeping, while Entwistle brooded in the lounge. Lisa beckoned Laurie to join her with the offer of a line of cocaine. We all did coke back then, all of a sudden. Lisa completely flipped out, described Laurie. She took off her shirt. She didn't have a bra on, and then she ran full force at the window, shouting, "I want to die! I want to die!" We were on the 40-something floor. She hit the window sideways on and cannonballed off. She only weighed like 90 pounds. She did this again and again, 4 times in all, and I just about freaked. I ran into the other room and shouted to John, "You need to come in here right now. Lisa's trying to throw herself out the window." He looked up at me and said, "Let her." I mean, this is where John was. She was just, who leaves their fucking boyfriend for 2 days, an addict? And I guarantee you she was screaming and yelling at him, and she probably told him that she cheated on him, and he probably fought back because she knew how to bring out the worst in John. That's what she did. She didn't bring out the best in John. They weren't cellmates. He didn't promise her that he was going to marry her before he left for that year in 2002. He did not say that. According to John, that no. Mm-mm. Entwistle did, however, get up and go into the bedroom. When he emerged after some time, it was with a prone Lisa hanging off his leg. With each step that Entwistle took, he dragged Lisa across the floor on her bare stomach. Laurie says. Finally, he turned to Steve and said, "Get this cunt off of me." When we did manage to do just that, they went off and got Lisa another room of her own in the hotel. In that last phase with John, Lisa was a train wreck, observes Joe Walsh. I know that both of them had got themselves into a pattern of anarchy and chaos. Because Lisa, this is why Joe broke up with Lisa, because they were in that gerbil wheel of anarchy and chaos. And now she had dragged John into it. I loved Lisa a lot, but she totally lost her path and her perspective. In retrospect, John must have had the occasional moments of clarity. By then, though, I think that his whole situation must have turned into a big, scary monster that he couldn't bring himself to confront. Even so, if John had really wanted to stop, then he would have done. Which, according to John and according to Cy, this was the end moment. Lisa had supposedly already been moved into one of the cottages on Corwood that and out of the main house before John left for Vegas. So that was that. Altogether, Entwistle had trapped himself in a vicious circle. There was no difference anymore whether he was holed up at Corwood or off on tour. He would debilitate himself just the same, one way or another. When the Who played the pen, penultimate date of this latest reunion at the last date, Wembley Arena in mid-November of 2000, he appeared to be in a desolate state. Like Maxine at the Hollywood Bowl, Chris Charlesworth was taken aback when he encountered him backstage at Wembley. By that point, Charlesworth had not seen Entwistle for the better part of 4 years. There was a big hospitality area that was full of people I didn't recognize, and John was sort of standing off to one side on his own, Charlesworth remembers. He greeted me like an old friend, but he looked sad to me. He was clearly a bit pissed, too. He had a big glass of brandy and was a little glassy-eyed. He just didn't look look a well man at all. Sequestered at Corwood for the next 6 months, Entwistle locked himself up with Lisa once again with money to burn through. When he grew to be spiritless and unsettled, as ever he would put a call into Steve Luongo and had him set up yet another grueling club tour of America for the John Entwistle Band. This one would run from mid-May to mid-July and would take them to places like Poughkeepsie, New York, Kelseyville, California, and Kettering, Ohio. Like their glamorous. Like their leader, the band also was running in ever decreasing circles. I don't see that though. Um, was shit happening because of Lisa? Absolutely. Was he at the bottom of the barrel that he was going to get with Lisa? Yes. Was he drinking that night I was with him? No. Apparently. I mean, they're just. I think John was different with different women in his life, but because he wasn't on tour and because, Lisa would scream and throw a fit if she wasn't out there, or like we know at the, what do we call it? The first ever online, the iBash, where I was with John. It was in Vegas and I was with John and she surprised him, quote unquote. She would do stuff like that. And I think with me, he found a different solace than what he found with everybody else. And he didn't have to turn to the bottle and the booze. He knew I didn't like the drugs. He knew I didn't drink that much. He didn't have to be anybody but just John, that we could talk about the history that he loved, that we could talk about art, that we could talk about so many different things that he was missing and lacking in his relationship with Lisa. She was a dead weight that was holding him down. And I'm not saying that as the other woman. I'm saying that as someone who cared for John. And we all knew. I mean, a lot. Maxine's not saying it in here. Charlesworth isn't saying it. Kerbishley isn't saying it. But the Luongos are. Give them as much bullshit as I know. Cy said that the Luongos betrayed John in here. But you know what? At least with that, I know they were honest. So I give them credit where credit is due for being the only people saying that out loud. So, according to Godfrey Townsend, such was Entwistle's weakened state that his doctor cautioned him against doing the tour in 2002. Townsend said he was asked not to smoke on the tour bus so that Entwistle might be encouraged to refrain. Before they set off on the road, Luongo also tried to stop Entwistle from having access to cocaine. Oh, this was the tour that year. Anyway, I called up all of his connections that I knew of, including his assistant to the Who, which was Cy Langston, and said to each of them, "Look, I would really like to shut things down and for him not to be able to reach out to you," he explains. John always had someone doing things for him, so he didn't know anybody to call. He couldn't get stuff on his own. So he stopped trying, and for that one tour, he embraced sobriety. And on 2002, like I've said a million times, it was that roadie Roger with the screw on hat. And kind of have no doubt that John, that Cy did get him the cocaine, because I did a line right along with John and Bill Everlay, his art dealer. I was the only one in the room that didn't do any cocaine, so yeah, and it just, but like I said, he wasn't drinking that night, so, and I didn't see him even grab a drink when he first got in and we first went to the center bar. I grabbed a quick glass of champagne. Um, they went to Shepler's, got something to eat, went back to the Hard Rock. But yeah, so John could embrace sobriety, but he had so many fears of being alone without Lisa, being alone in Corwood, which he wouldn't have been because he had Christopher and his mom there. He was talking about taking me back there because he didn't want to be alone. So, so that tour he embraced. This is not a view shared by Townsend. In his natural habitat, John smoked 2 packs of Winston 100s a day and drank a bottle of Remy Martin every night. On top of that, he would do whatever people brought to him. The same people that he had told me not to smoke around John would also bring the cocaine to him. Yep. Roger wouldn't eat well either, or he wouldn't eat well either. John, not Roger. At one point on the tour, we were sitting down to dinner somewhere, and the menu got passed around. I was going to get a veggie burger. I turned to John and said, "Why don't you try one of these?" He said, "Okay," but then he added, "Don't let it go to your head." You couldn't stop him from doing anything, and whenever we were out on the road, he would mostly push things to the limit. My wife at the time would see pictures and go, "Oh my God, John looks white." He always just had that pasty look. At the end of the tour, Entwistle heard from Bobby Pridden that Townsend was making plans for a new Who album, destined to be their first in 20 years. Via Pridden, Townsend asked Entwistle to submit up to 7 new songs for consideration for the proposed record, out of which he meant to pick 4. That Townsend chose not to speak directly to Entwistle about any of this was indicative of just how distant from each other the men had become. But I think that was always that way because Pete Townsend and John Entwistle, or Roger Daltrey, both kind of live. They're the ego side of the band. John was larger than life and kind of anchored that, but those two needed that kind of royalty interaction to feed their egos. And I don't get me wrong, I don't dislike Pete. He's always been very kind towards me. I don't know him, but the things he spoke about in the press, he has never been degrading to me, so I respect that. Um, all right. Entwistle, though, was temporarily fired up again. Immediately, he summoned Luongo over to Corwood. Pridden set them up on the top floor demo studio, and they went to work writing the new material. Entwistle's burst of enthusiasm soon abated, though. No longer able to tolerate being around Lisa in the main house, Lisa was put up in one of the, or Luongo was put up in one of the Corwood cottages. One morning, Entwistle called down and asked if he might come over and join him for breakfast. It was early for John, 9:30, 10 a.m., and so I was surprised, says Luongo, which it was. John would get up around 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon. I mean, our wake-up call for June 27th of 2002 was like 1 o'clock because he had an interview to do. That morning was the most morose and vulnerable that I ever saw John, and it was when he was stone cold sober. I expected him to walk in and straight away start laughing at the sight of me cooking in the kitchen. But when he came through the door, he had the most mournful expression on his face. He looked sad, lost, almost in tears. Even at home, I had never known John not to be dressed up like a rock star. He was always dressed to the nines. Always. Yet he had on a pair of old beige Wranglers and sneakers. Until then, I hadn't known that he even owned a pair of sneakers. I didn't even know that either. This is the first I'm hearing about it, you know? He told me he wasn't really hungry, So I knew that he had something else on his mind. Sure enough, he began to talk about Lisa. He came to me looking for advice. He even asked me, "How do I get out of this? What should I do?" Steve, I'm going to tell you for the first time, he asked me the same thing before he got to Vegas. Lisa was out of control by this stage. She resented anybody else's friendship with John, and things had got to be toxic up at the house. Last time that I had stayed up there, she had gone into a rage and thrown a phone at my head. I just couldn't bear to be near her any longer, and John understood it. It was kind of an unspoken agreement between us. I think John was desperate to figure out a way to get the life that he was leading, to get out of the blah, blah, blah. I think John was desperately trying to figure out a way to get out of the life that he was leading with her. Many times he had told me that he envied me and my happy marriage. And it was obvious to both Lori and me that he had loved Allison, his first wife, deeply. Both of us came to believe that when that relationship ended, it truly had screwed him up. I think it did, but honestly, I think the biggest love of his life was Maxine. You know, Lisa, when he was with Allison, that was his childhood sweetheart. They were together, they were expected. It was the times that, and he was cheating on her. He had several side because he did have a daughter with another woman named Zoe. Um, but I think that yes, Allison was his first love, and there's nobody that's ever going to replace your surf love. Woo, banana surfing. But anyway, your first love. Nobody's going to replace your first love. So she'll always hold that special place. But really, I think Maxine was kind of the one that was really so far the love of his life. I mean, and John did speak to me about crazy Lisa. We both had a crazy Lisa in our life at some point. Um, and I think that he was really hard on himself for the divorce with Allison and cheating with Maxine, but he loved Maxine and he wanted to be with her. And we're always going to have some feelings for our first love, but I think Allison really kind of manipulated that. She really kind of lorded over John even after their divorce and after her remarriage and everything. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but this is just from what John, from conversations that I personally had with John over the years. All right. That morning I said to him, maybe you need to get a maybe you need a girl that maybe you don't need a girl that pretty. Maybe you don't need to be the guy from the Who. Maybe you should go out and meet somebody who knows you as just plain old John. That, though, was something that he just didn't want or wasn't able to do. You didn't know about me, Steve. He had that in his life. He had someone beside you to talk about things that you didn't know about that I'm not going to reveal to anybody ever. But he did have that. He had that for 13 years with me. He had someone that didn't give a fuck about him being in the Who. He didn't give a fuck about him and his drugs because I didn't do the drugs and I wouldn't bring him into his life. And you know what? I was not bad looking. And Lisa complained that I was prettier than her. Not that I was. I don't think I was. I don't think I'm prettier. I don't think I'm some fucking goddess or anything like that. I just am a cool ass chick. That's all. And it shines through. All right. So that was something he just didn't want to do or wasn't able to do. He was able to do it. He just wasn't able to get away from the confines of what the old school society thought processes were. You have to do this, you have to do this. A rock star has a woman at home, he has a side whore, whatever. All right. That was another thing about John. He was all about collecting trophies. Like I said, he had several women on the road, but most of those women they were in love with John, yes, but they were in love with John from The Who. They were in love with the man he was because of The Who. I was a generation that was removed from The Who, so I just got to know him as the man he was, that liked old westerns, that liked art, that liked to draw, that liked history, that, you know, liked to collect anything, would just go on collecting binges, you know. One night he would tell Lisa to shape up or ship out. By the next, she would have played on his insecurities, and things would go right back to being where they were. He was so used to having other people carry out his dirty work for him, me included, that he didn't know how to stand his ground. Well, Cy always did a lot of that dirty work for him, so I know Cy had a hand in telling Lisa that she better be out of the that John would send her money from the road and she better be gone by the time that he got home. Shortly after the sessions at Corwood wrapped up, Townsend cooled on the idea of making a new Who album. The handful of songs that Entwistle had written with Luongo that late summer went unrecorded and forgotten about, which that pissed me off because Pete did that all the time. He played John like a puppet. He played John on this up and down roller coaster stuff because he could. Because, like I said, every band has De Fuhrer, the guy that controls every fucking thing. Not the business guy of the band, but the guy that controls it. In The Who, that's Pete Townsend. One, and like I said, nothing against Pete Townsend, no disrespect, but that's just, one bright, clear September day when they were still working at Corwood, two commercial airlines were piloted into the Twin Towers. Oh. To the World Trade Center in New York. As they started to digest the events of that September 11th afternoon, Luongo urged that they should go do something positive. The month following, the John Entwistle Band happened to have another handful of shows lined up in the New York area, including one at B.B. King's Blues Club, Midtown Manhattan, on October 21st. Luongo suggested they add a second night at the club and make it a benefit concert. Entwistle agreed at once, and Luongo went ahead and made arrangements for an extra show to go ahead on the night of October 20th. Almost as soon as he had, Entwistle had got a call from Townsend. Townsend had just got off the phone with Paul McCartney, who was also in the process of organizing a benefit show for October 20th. It was to be called the Concert for New York and would be staged at Madison Square Garden. For his event, McCartney had already lined up David Bowie, Elton John, Mick Jagger, and Keith Richards, Janet Jackson, and Jay-Z, and he wanted Townsend to commit The Who to perform. I heard John say to Pete, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." "No, can't do it. We're playing," recalls Luongo. Then he hung up the phone. When he told me that the call from Pete was what was about, I said to him, "Are you nuts?" I told him that this was a lot bigger than us and that he couldn't be the guy to prevent The Who from playing a charity gig. So John called Pete right back and agreed to do both shows. He did, though, put in all kinds of stipulations. The Who's rehearsals had to be made had to be made to fit around our band's schedule. They would have to go on early in the night so that we could make our gig. After the Who set, John also insisted that he and I be able to hop into a limousine and be driven the 10 blocks uptown to B.B. King's. Now, you could say that John was a cunt to Pete, or that he was a man who didn't want to break his word to his fans. I'd say he was a bit of both, and I agree with that. John Entwistle's band show on October 20th ended up raising $10,000, which they donated to the Putnam Valley Volunteer Fire Department. Earlier that same evening, the Who blazed through their four-song set at the Garden, opening up with "Who Are You" and closing with a rousing "Won't Get Fooled Again." By common consensus, they were the highlight of the whole concert for New York show, and I could see that in the videos. It was the first truly great performance that they had given in almost 20 years at least, and it was an excellent performance. I watched it and it was absolutely amazing. From New York, Entwistle, Luongo, and Godfrey Townsend flew on to Japan. Entwistle had agreed to perform a series of Beatles tribute concerts billed as A Walk Down Abbey Road. The shows were a brainchild of Alan Parsons, engineer on both Abbey Road and Let It Be albums. For his show band, Parsons had also recruited Todd Rundgren, Hart singer Ann Wilson. Entwistle had been lured by an offer from Parsons of $10,000 a show. That was it? Parsons told I think at least $100,000 a show, John. Parsons told Entwistle, but I guess Lisa's coke habit really did have him fucking neck deep. Parsons told Entwistle that he tried to get Mick Fleetwood to drum, but without success. Entwistle suggested Luongo instead and even brokered him the same $10,000 terms. When Parsons then found himself short a guitarist, Entwistle had chipped in once more with Townsend, but on this occasion the fee was reduced significantly. The shows went well, and Entwistle, who had traveled without Lisa, appeared to be in better spirits. One night in Tokyo, he had joined Rundgren and Luongo in walking the 2 miles from their hotel to a strip club. At the end of their night, Rundgren also wanted to walk back. Reluctantly, Entwistle agreed. But it was weird because John liked to walk all over Corwood and walk for miles, so. Soon after they departed, he spotted a delicatessen open late. He went inside and bought a cream cake for himself. When they set off again, it began to drizzle. Todd was a fast walker, whereas John was wearing his Cuban heels as usual, recalls Luongo. I was trying to keep up the two ends of the train together, speeding to catch Todd up and then dropping back to check on John. Also, John was always concerned about his hair. You guys have heard me say this a million times. In fact, one of the last things he said that night, don't be scared of my head in the morning because I'm gonna wake up looking like the Mad Hatter. I'm like, I know, John, I've been there. Been there in the morning with you. I love my own bedhead though. All right. I was trying to keep up with two ends of the train together, speeding to catch Todd up and then dropping back to check on John. Also, John was always concerned about his hair, so he was bitching and moaning the whole way. Finally, we made it back to the hotel. It was a luxurious place with an all marble hallway, so quiet you could hear your own breathing echo in the halls. We stood waiting for the we were We stood waiting for the elevator. John was holding his cake in a box. As the elevator arrived, I turned to him and said, so let's hear some of that bitching and moaning now. With that, he did a windmill with the cake box, let go of it, and smashed it up against the top of the elevator. It sounded like a bomb going off. The desk clerk near enough passed out, and Todd went bug-eyed. Guess Keith Moon got a hold of him that. Keith, you can take Keith Moon out of the equation, but you can't take the equation out of Keith Moon. Okay. The desk clerk near enough passed out, and Todd went bug-eyed. The three of us got into the elevator and went up to our rooms without another word. The next morning I asked John, how was the cake? Smiling now, he said, a bit condensed. Tokyo was the last show that we did together. If I had known that at the time, I would have made sure to remember it better. Back in England that November, Entwistle had set up to have a section of his character pictures exhibited at a London gallery, The Cut, which had just then opened on a side street a stone's throw from the Waterloo train station. The gallery owner, Terry Rawlings, arranged a launch party for the exhibition that Entwistle attended. Dougal Butler and Richard Barnes also went along to the soiree. John turned up and he was all gray, remembers Barnes. He had gray hair, gray skin, and he had on a gray suit. I even said to him, weren't you on the cover of last month's Embalming Monthly? John proceeded to polish off almost an entire bottle of Remy to himself. I'm no stranger to people drinking, but that is a lot of fucking booze. And it was, because this is where Lisa had dragged him down to. And as addicts do, she was trying to isolate him from the rest of his family. Butler recalls, Richard came over to me and said, fuck me, Dougal. What is John like? Speaking for myself, I couldn't have been more shocked. John was nothing like the man I had known. I mean, I never even saw Moon get himself into a state that was that bad. As soon as it's because Keith was still young when he passed. As soon as I went on my train home to Twickenham, I got on my phone and rang Allison, John's ex-wife. I told her that I had just seen John at this exhibition and that he had ended up being near comatose. I said to her, Allison, I've got the exact same feeling in my blood and water as I did with Moon. He'll be gone within months if somebody doesn't do something. And this is what ring up other people that were also currently in his life, not just the ex-wife, giving her the ammunition to lord over everything in his life. I mean, she even banned Maxine from supposedly banned Maxine, the second ex-wife, from the, what do you call it, the funeral. So, next day, Allison rang her ex-husband. She told him that she needed to have a talk with him, and they arranged to have lunch. Before the agreed date, Entwistle called back and canceled. It would be the last time the two of them spoke. All right, so you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it because we're almost at an hour, and that was just chapter 22. I'll read 23 at another on another episode, but yeah, so that kind of tells you where John was at before he passed away. A lot of people don't realize, you know, people when we are not knowledgeable or friends or something with the musicians that we watch on stage, we tend to see him in a different way. We tend to see, oh, he has a girlfriend at home, so everything's hunky dory. Just because she's the woman at home, the woman on the road is the whore, and the woman at home is the glittering, glowing angel. But as we can see, it wasn't that way for John, and he was on his last leg with Lisa. Like I said, he and Cy had unceremoniously made sure, because Cy went over there right before for rehearsals and to help get him packed and get everything ready for the tour, as I always did. He was over there. And only Cy, John, and I knew about that, apparently, that Cy had found it was to the point where Cy John told Cy, and then John stood by Cy and said, I agree with Cy. I want you gone by the time I get back home. And had Cy taken her stuff and helped her move, and it was a knockdown, drag out. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to go into all the details that even Cy told me later on. But that was John's life before he died. So no wonder he needed me so bad. No wonder it was me that the universe, the goddesses, God, whoever you believe in, chose for me to be with him when he died, because he needed someone that was going to be there for him, even in death. I didn't leave him. I didn't leave my friend. I didn't leave my longtime lover. I was there for him. I might have slipped through it, and I beat myself up about that every day, but so there you go. There's chapter 22 of The Ox by Paul Reese, that piece of shit that I hate so bad because he lies about everything else from there on out about John's last night. Like I said, never even asked me, doesn't spell my name right, did not come to me. There's no details. Didn't even bother to read my book, which was already out by the time this book was written. So there you go. And I'm sure, like I said, you see the reliance on Allison, the first wife, which because that was his first love and they were from such a different time, John did listen to her, which I'm kind of mad that he did cancel with her, because she probably could have, but maybe that's why. Maybe because he's like, oh, I handled Lisa, I don't need to go to lunch with my ex. Because he also arranged to hang out with Maxine when they rolled through California, or wherever she was. And yeah, it's John was holding on to was trying to, the positive influences in John's life was trying to hold on to him, and Lisa was dragging him back with a lot of force. So I think that's where he was before he hit Vegas. So tell me what you guys think, you guys who fans. Tell me what you think about that chapter. It's a pretty heavy chapter. I think it's heavier than when he passed away, to be honest. So in a way, he got free of it, but just not in the way any of us wanted him to. But all right, you guys, and thank you for getting through this super long episode today, through this reading, through the blackout episode. I totally appreciate you guys. I totally love this family. You guys really don't know how much you truly, truly mean to me. And for anybody that's just stumbling by, that's just wandering on, come and join the fam. We got a lot of awesome, badass people here. A lot of 80s groupies, which I'm loving hearing all these 80s groupie stories because, everybody's down on all the rock stars and stuff. It's like, I don't know. I mean, there's victims that need to be heard. I just know that a bunch of us are not the ones that need to be heard. And by forcing victimhood upon us, it takes away from the people who truly need to be heard. So go check out all of us 80s ladies 80s ladies in the comments on the interviews that I do, because we are some rockin' ass bitches and there are some good ass stories to be heard. So all right, you guys, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Hit the share button. Let's get out there. We are continuing to grow steadily, and I'm so excited for that. We're rounding out to 3,200. Let's get to 10,000. That's the next goal. So thank you guys. Share, share, share. Support it. You guys are amazing at the support that you've given me. And hit my bells, and we'll see you next time on Cocktails and Rocktails. Cheers, my dears.